everybody, and welcome to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. Our guest today is a good friend and colleague of mine, Shweta Parmar. Shweta is a Ayurvedic practitioner at GutsierLiving, and she has worked with all sorts of different people throughout her career and working in Ayurvedic practice and holistic healing. But one of the specialties that she works with are womb bins. And so we're going to learn a little bit about that today and understand how we can really amplify our lives and the quality of our lives, really, by really thinking about what we're putting into our bodies, how we're looking at our bodies, our lifestyle, and really just more beyond just the diet, but really from a holistic approach. So we're really excited to have you on the show today, Shweta. Welcome.
Thank you, Sneha. So lovely to be here, and always nice to connect with like-hearted and like-minded practitioners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love for you first to just go into the work that you're doing right now and maybe how that's evolved over the years, and just talk to people about your role and how you're working with patients and clients.
Yeah. So, GutsierLiving, which is digesting food, thoughts, and emotions for bold, intuitive living. That's what it stands for. And so playing on the nuance of gut, right? And so in Ayurveda, we really focus a lot on true health. And what I mean by true health is through our digestive health, and not just digesting food, but the completeness of life. And so my journey kind of in Ayurveda began because I've been healing myself from a genetic disease. And so it's been quite the journey, and it continues to be. To make a longer story short, I'm supposed to be on dialysis by now, and I'm not. And I'm actually thriving in different ways, and usually in the allopathic nephrology world, it's usually not the case according to statistics or their perspective on what the science is, right? In that way. And so here it's just really healing through aligning ourselves with the laws of nature. And so we all appreciate nature, right? Like the forest, the woods, the beach, but all those 5 elements kind of manifest within us. So the name of the game becomes like, if I'm going to live out like a full, happy, complete life and really harness my highest potential as a unique being, my unique mind and body constitution, how am I going to align my daily habits with these laws of natures and the rhythms? Because everything in life works on a rhythm. And so breathing, as you are a birth worker also, contractions are a rhythm, moon cycles a rhythm, seasons a rhythm. And so here, what sadly we have been out of touch with and don't charge ourselves with is the understanding and awareness of how these rhythms of nature really impact our hormones and enzyme secretions, and they go out of whack. And once they go up, that rhythm is disturbed, it creates a lot of diseases, and disorders, through mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so Ayurveda is a beautiful science of living that really supports our deeper awareness. As once we align, our awareness becomes quite more expanded, and we're able to see within ourselves the good, bad, and the ugly, so then we can make the right changes in our thought process, thus our actions, our habits. And so for me, I'm really passionate about the womb and women's health in that way, because as we harness this creativity, right, this creative force, and a lot of folks who follow spiritual paths understand it as Shakti energy or, goddess energies, various traditions, but the essence is the same, is that how do we harness this creativity that goes beyond, that is a constant life force within us, right? In creation, in life, through our mind and body. And so to me, without women, like bodily or gendered women, and also men who carry the feminine energy, how can we be healthier so that that life force energy is so vast that you're unstoppable and you're just harnessing and living the life of your dreams, right? Whatever your desires are. And to me, as a former social justice organizer, I was an immigrant rights organizer. So my journey went from external to internal liberation work. I'm very passionate. One, of course, of all the BS that women have to deal with at a society level, right? With all the inequities and injustices, all of that. But to me, the health and well-being and the vitality of women and babies is the key to a harmonious, just world.
Absolutely. You said a lot of really great things there. And so much of it I resonate with, just coming from, the Indian subcontinent and coming from the probably similar kind of spiritual backgrounds as well, and being raised in a similar kind of environment. I totally resonate with the fact that there's so much out there that's, very strict, like even like you said, with your own health and with your own body, there's statistics and there's a lot of medicine that's rightfully there to help in a lot of different ways, but that we can actually bring a lot of control to ourselves when we take a look at what are we really doing with our bodies, what's our mindset, what's our lifestyle, what are the things that we're feeding our bodies, souls, minds on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, and how's that impacting how we feel and how we navigate through the world. And absolutely everything affects it, right? Like we have so much evidence now on, like, even science is talking about like epigenetics. It's such a big thing now, and talking about how we're not doomed with the genes that we're kind of just born with in life, but that, there's a lot of things from the environment that can affect those genes and the way that they're expressed, and how we can kind of experience the world in different ways. And so even science is like starting to, Western science that is starting to like look into that. But this Ayurvedic practice has kind of seen that for way longer. And so just to orient people just on Ayurveda itself, because I think there might be a lot of misconceptions in mainstream media or what people might think of in popular culture as Ayurveda. And I would love for you to kind of I guess just more specifically, just break down like what that practice is exactly and how you work with patients as an Ayurvedic practitioner.
Yeah. And so Ayurveda is translated as the science of life. And as I shared earlier, it's kind of like understanding who you are as a body and how the energies of the elements affect your body and your mind. So we're all unique beings. And so the 5 elements of nature, which is why we have 5 fingers, it's not a coincidence. And so these 5 elements of nature of earth, water, fire, which is why, growing up, right, we learned the middle finger, which represents being pissed off, right, or angry, which represents the fire element, air and space element. So the permutations or the combinations of these bioenergies, which is so many, like that's why twins aren't even alike, right? And so they constitute different tendencies of the mind and of the body. So for example, just to very general, it is a clinical science. That's why we have practitioners. That's why we have doctors, Ayurvedic doctors, to have a deeper assessment on the disease process and how who you are, your mind and body permutations play out in a disease process. And then obviously how we have a specific diet, lifestyle, and an herbal protocol plan. This is not a one size fits all process because again, we are unique beings. And so these permutations of these 3 bioenergies of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha play out differently depending on how you're responding or reacting to life conditions, what's going on in your life. So you have a state, your bliss state when you were born, which we call prakriti, when the egg and the sperm mate, is your blueprint. And then life happens, like joys, traumas, challenges, which take us away from our natural state of beingness. So it takes us kind of here in the now. Now there's this gap, right? So the name of the game becomes why people come to us, because they feel they're not themselves, right? Something is missing out of their lives. And, that has, some people could be too obsessed with that, right? But the point is, then they start seeking different ways, modalities, or other things that they can do in their lives to start to close this gap, to become the constitution of who they really are. So this could be Vata Pitta, this could be Pitta Kapha, whatever that is for you, your assessment, then we close the gap with those specific diet lifestyle recommendations. Now, how do we know what is your blueprint and what is your now state? So as practitioners and doctors, we have different diagnostic tools. So we check pulse, just like in Chinese medicine also, which give us clues about, which energies of these doshas, we call it, could be dominant in your bliss state and your blueprint, and then your now state, darshana, where we look at someone's face and we get clues from there. Your tongue. And there's a lot of other esoteric practices as well, depending on one's spiritual path and how your own journey is evolving. And then Q&A, right? What is the client's experience? What are they dealing with? Holding space for that, listening, and then of course recommending a plan that is doable for them and actionable. And obviously educating clients why, for example, what does rhythms of nature and aligning with that means, and what the impact that has been on why they're feeling the way they're doing. So a large part of my work, beyond like clinical assessments and recommendations, it's a big part of sharing knowledge and education that is unlearning. Like people have to unlearn that 8 glasses of water may not be healthy for them. Maybe you don't need 8 hours of sleep, right? So much messaging that we get in the wellness world may not be the right thing for you as a unique being. And, same thing in birth work, right? Like, some recommendations, if someone's coming you for pelvic pain, I have to understand like which bioenergies, what is the root cause of this bioenergy, the imbalances, and then recommend suggestions, diet, lifestyle, and herbs accordingly. So a lot of my work, I feel, and that is very, I think, life-changing, and which I thoroughly enjoy, is challenging people's understanding of what they kind of already may have conditioned themselves with or belief, but giving them some knowledge of, hey, maybe this understand this principle, and then learn to apply it for your current condition. So if that makes sense, it may not be like, hey, Shatavari may not be another popular women's health herb, right? May not be the right possibly solution in this moment for you because XYZ reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that it's very personalized and customized, because I mean, that's the way that any clinical practice should look at everyone. But unfortunately, sometimes with Western medicine, there is a little bit of a blanket kind of diagnosis, blanket treatment options for lots of different people, to organize and to create kind of patterns and whatever, but sometimes there's just that little bit more that you have to do with digging and understanding the individual, understanding the client, understanding the patient a little bit more and their goals to really get to root cause. Like you said, like root cause is so important, and should really be the guiding principle. And I love that in Ayurveda, you, like, we talk about like all the different energies that you had just mentioned, which it might be new for some listeners, but they're just kind of, and Shweta, you can explain this much better than me, I'm sure, but they're just different states of energy that can, when one is more dominant, manifests in your life in the way that you think, in the way that you behave, in the way that you speak, in the way that your bodily processes work. It's just a little bit different depending on which energy is more dominant or less dominant. And so, yeah, I really love that. And if you want to touch on things, go for it.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like, so for example, like a concrete example of, emotionally, women can be resentful, if they're not expressing themselves, which can cause more inflammation and their pitta or fire element to be increase, within them. Especially mothers overwhelm, and that can cause or lead to resentment, if they're not getting the right support or able to ask for the right support in different ways. And that manifests, right, in the body, mind, and etc. The other key thing I would share in Ayurveda is the focus on gut health. We call it Agni. And so, in mainstream, the gut microbiome is a very hot, popular topic and in our day and age. But here in Ayurveda, we're looking at it as a energy of like transformation, not just about the physical gut, but this fire, like this, the energy of the fire of transformation, because that heat will transform from that anger to something maybe of, of acceptance or compassion or something like that, right? So is that lit? Is that energy harmonized so that anything that life is throwing at you or what you're experiencing in life, may be knowledge or a problem or whatever it is, are you able to change it and transform it? And so understanding as a practitioner the state of a client's Agni is a huge part of our work as well, and what's causing the imbalance in the Agni as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you are bringing in the Sanskrit terminology into the work, because it's derives from so much of spirituality, but science at the same time. And in the Western world, those two things are very, very separated, right? Like Agni for us, it just means fire. It's like a Sanskrit Hindi, like in our culture. And so it just shows that in a lot of different cultures and different parts of the world, for listeners in the Western world, that science and spirituality are very much one and the same and intertwined, that you can't quite separate. That's why when someone says, I do yoga, and they refer only to doing a downward dog pose in a class once a week, that's not the extent of the yogic philosophies. It's a science. It's a very complex science, actually. And it comes from the Vedas and from the Vedic principles of, the Indian subcontinent and from the Hindu philosophies. And not to turn this into a religious conversation at all, but to say that the religion, the spirituality, the science, the healing, all of it is actually very much the same. And it's such a hard thing for people in the Western world to understand, because they want to separate it so much. But that's just not the way that it's done in other parts of the world. I'd love for you to just touch on your experience with that, I guess, even in your own upbringing, in your life, and then of course in your profession and the way that you work with patients.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're bang on, because I think Western and West doesn't mean a physical West, right? And this way, I think it's a mentality, because I go to India and big cities, and that same understanding of yoga as asanas is stressed now. And it's like, this is where it was birthed. Holy, oh my God, like what is going on here? And, there's not a deeper understanding of when to do yoga, right? It's, we fit in wellness or things just randomly. Like, so, oh, I have time. I'll decide when I have time, but understanding that the bio clock and doing yoga at that time may not actually could be detrimental for you, right? And people don't even think of it as, again, it's this separate thing, or thinking as like, oh, whenever I have time, versus it should be the other way around. This is the proper time to do a certain practice, or eat even, forget yoga if you have a yoga practice, but waking up times, sleeping times, meal times, right? Like all of this, there's a science to why certain things should be done at a proper time. And then we schedule other stuff around it, especially you have the privilege to do that, and schedule, other things around that schedule, then versus just like the mind thing, right? Of like, whenever I have time, then I'll take care of myself. But I think that's part of like such the colonialist, and patriarchy, all the isms that we are socially deal with, it intensely plays out in our mind and our tissues, organs, like everything. And so part of, as somebody who's healing myself from a genetic disease and being in the non-wellness world for some time in martyrdom, was still doing really important work in the world for social justice, but there was no regard to any sacredness of nature in our day-to-day in a practical way, right? And things. So I think your point of just saying like everything's so integrated, like because again, it's the science of life or living. It's just a way of life, not this separate thing that you do whenever you have time, kind of thing. So, and sadly, people don't understand that some of the reasons that they might still have different diseases, even if they're doing a lot of good stuff for themselves, like yoga exercises, or
You just used air quotes, by the way, for the listeners.
right,
I love it.
or eating clean, but they're still having issues because again, these timings are not being adhered to.
Yeah. And that goes back to the rhythm that you had mentioned, that things follow a very specific rhythm. And I think you and I know too many New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, or women and men and everyone in between who kind of live this very rigid, like work, pick up the kids from school, run to this, take a class. Like it's a very, like you said, it's very scheduled. And then the wellness comes, if it comes at all, somewhere in the midst of that. And it's called, again, quote unquote, self-care, when you
Right.
just take, when you call it taking a glass of wine or going for a walk or getting in a hot bathtub or, doing something like that. But that's in a lot of other practices, like the Ayurvedic practice, like wellness means everything first. It's like all of it should be wellness. And then you, like you said, you schedule your life around. And I know that's not the way that the world is designed now in certain places, like the kind of places where we live. And to be completely honest, I also do not create my whole life around my wellness practice and then schedule my patients in. Being completely honest, I want people to know that I'm not trying to say that this is like a wrong way to live and that I hate that. I do hate that that's the way that it is. But that, I'm just trying to highlight that this is a fact of society, unfortunately. And so, but there's so much that we can do to try to incorporate more of wellness being a lifestyle as opposed to it being this afterthought kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cool part is that you don't have to, it's not about scheduling so much, right? 5 minutes. It's the rhythm, which isn't about quantity. I think the other thing we're conditioned is like, oh, how, you get, and I'm sure you get this in your practice, is like, how many times should I do this in a day? Or how many this, or how many that, and it's just like, no, that you can just, at least, even if you pause 3 minutes a day consistently. And the beautiful part is that, like, again, your Agni will be recalibrated, if you just pick one or two things. And so you don't have to be scheduling too much around things, because you're sending a message to your being, your spirit and your soul, that, hey, I'm willing and I'm committed to living to some rhythms here and creating some rhythms. So the enzymes and it's chemical. We're like a walking chemical being. So everything secretes properly and naturally when things start to sync up. As you know, when you're working with the body so much, things start to sync up. And the amazing thing is that just little consistent practices that vibration will spill out into other things in your life. So you don't even have to be doing too much, because as things innerly are recalibrating and syncing up and becoming more whole and integrated, that will affect all your relationships in your life. And you don't even have to do anything about it. You might manifest whatever it is that you want, like one of my favorite stories is I had a client come to me. She didn't want to do surgery for a hiatal hernia. And the only solution they kept telling her at this point, like, you have to do, she's like, I really don't want to do it. She's a struggling queer filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, super competitive industry, right? Like she had all the quote unquote things against her, queer, documentary, all of those things. And she started to implement one of my 45-day programs about on cellular intelligence and just reinstating the natural intelligence of our cells. And everything, like so many things, she didn't come to me she came to me because of her hiatal hernia, but her films started to get funded that weren't getting funded for years, but she was starting to feel harmonized and whole, and naturally other parts of your life start to recalibrate because you are approaching it differently, or your state of being is different. And like, that's so much of the fun part of this work.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about quantity. So if you're doing, to me, the quality is about just the consistency. And even if it's freaking 1 minute of pause, let's say, a day, or if you're waking up a little bit earlier with the sun slowly but consistently, then it'll go such a long way.
Yeah,
So
and I love that you said that. And I also wanted to add that I think what you're trying to touch on is this mindfulness, and again, quote on air quotes on that wonderful hot topic word of how you do the things that you do, right? So to your point, the state of being of doing the filmmaking, or the state of being of whatever it is that you have to do in your life that's maybe stressful or creates or induces some kind of certain types of energies in your body, picking your kids up from school, whatever it is. But the way that you're approaching it and the way that you're looking at it, it harnesses its own energy. And that can be very self-driven and conscious, or it can just be like an infliction just because of the mundane nature of the different things that you do. And so I think part of this work, and at least from just thinking about like the spirituality and like the background of everything that you're speaking of, is bringing joy and bringing conscious awareness of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that it's always a choice on how you view a fact, right? Like there's always like the fact is, and then you can go, my patient canceled on me that I had planned my whole something around, I don't know, I just made that up.
yeah.
And then you can view that as that is terrible and it screws up my day, or like whatever. You can think of it as like a bad thing. Or you can turn around and be like, oh, okay, so what from this comes out that I can do differently, or think about it more positively, or that serves me a little better. And I know that's like a very complex, or not complex, but an abstract way of looking at things, and maybe rather kind of simplified. But I think that it's also necessary to think of it that way in some ways, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's it's a choice at the end of the day. And again, the state of inflammation in your mind and body will determine if you're going to react, how you're going to react, respond to that, and if you're going to see it as a choice. Because at the end of the day, it's only going to affect you if you're going to get, or we're going to get pissed off of a client canceling or something, you know, or being like, oh, well, man, like they're just having a hard time, or this gives me more time to just relax or meditate instead, you know, or like whatever spin we're going to give it on it. And so it's like such a practical thing, again, of how like these energies within our mind and body can, if there's too much inflammation, so these imbalances of these bioenergies, that determines what we're going to make out of it, of the situation, which is like essential if we're going to have any sense of grounding and grasp of life. Like, and we all have so much going on, right, all the time. And so how are we going to navigate this crazy, wild, beautiful life?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to transition into the Wombins concept, because that was a new word for me in your work. And so I'd love to introduce that topic to listeners, and then maybe from there dive into your personal experiences working with New York Wombins and kind of the different patterns that you've been seeing lately.
Yeah. So Women, so that's for those who might be, it's women's health is usually WOMEN. And so we're saying WOMBEN. So here we're focused on the womb, as it's like a seed, right? There's different perspectives people might take. Some people might take it as a feminist thing, viewpoint. For me, I include that in my writings to honor the creative energy. I mean, it's quite the miracle. No one can truly understand how an egg and a sperm can meet and create an us. Like we wouldn't be here. It's, I mean, you have the biology of it, right? But that life force and that creative energy that makes all of this stuff happen in life, that divinity, no one can really explain that. And so I use it to honor the sacredness of this creative force, which houses, like the womb is the center of creativity. And if we even go micro level, I talk, it's even about the power of the egg. So especially as women, as creative, as creatrix and creators, how is the quality again of our egg is the key. So maybe the health of the uterus, the womb, the ovaries, but here, and I go microscopic to the egg level, because the egg actually, we talk about it as, we talk about, is your mind leading your life, right? Especially that's why mindfulness is so popular these days, is because oftentimes that's been the problem, like the mind is ruling and reigning. But here we call it ovarian intelligence. And so if your quality of your eggs are good, again, through your customized lifestyle and diet habits, and if needed, herbs, then your creative force is going to be in charge of all your decisions and choices in your life. So that affects focus, that affects clarity, that affects, again, your habits, right? It all starts with a thought. Even deeper than that, then that becomes repatterning your subconscious patterning. And so here, the subconscious, in the yogic philosophy, the Vijnana Maya Kosha, is where all thoughts and feelings stem from that we all experience. So as birth workers, that subconscious patterning actually can be dealt with for the baby way ahead of time, which unfortunately a lot of parents don't even understand or think that's possible. And so at one level, my work involves for the mother or a non-mother, if they're a woman, if someone a woman is concerned of her health. I'm very focused on the creating quality eggs, and it doesn't matter if you're going to want to be a mother or not, because here we're looking beyond just reproductive reasons. It's about creating the life that you want and letting the ovarian intelligence deciding that. And the second part is, if you are, maybe you'll be a single mother, want to be a single mother or in partnership, whatever that looks like. The key here is for supporting the parents of asking the question, how are we preparing the baby for life? Right? Again, through the subconscious repatterning work.
That's amazing.
So yeah, so the soul coming in, so there's some conscious practices that parents or whatever the caregivers can be facilitating that harmonize their subconscious as well as the soul coming in. So they're in a quote unquote better place to deal with life's challenges later on. So the foundation is strong, right? So you work with so many bodies, the skeletal system, the muscles, the organs, all of that, right? It's a house. So if that foundation is not strong, and as someone who works with pelvic and pain and pelvic everything, if that is really healthy and grounded, it changes up so much in one person's life experience and how they're experiencing life. And so here, the caregivers work with the soul before conception, then during pregnancy, and then after, because till age 2 or 3, the baby has no mind model. They have no mind. So there's so much imprinting that is happening. And so if they're doing conscious activities, they can harmonize the baby's patterning and set a strong foundation for their life as adults.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So I don't even know what to call, like I've been, contemplating, I haven't come up with a name yet. It's like beyond prevention, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because in our circles, we kind of like start thinking about, and it's adults, as adults, we're like, oh, who am I? Or Joe Dispenza's work is really popular right now, right, with subconscious patterning, but the yogic and the ancient wisdom philosophy has a bit of a different perspective on what is kind of out there in the personal development world. Yeah, so again, kind of going back to women's health. So we're really looking at not just the limited way of a gendered woman, but the power of like the sacred space and this power of the egg and the intelligence that kind of gets us out of our limited patternings into more expansiveness, deeper awareness, and intuition, right? All of it, so that we're living a more fulfilling and expansive life.
Well, this is absolutely incredible, Shweta. I mean, so much of what you said, I'm just like, wow, like the knowledge of these ancient cultures, that there's so much out there that we can learn and use and better ourselves and better generations to come. It's so fascinating how much information is sometimes lost and masked just by a prenatal visit, just being that's it, an ultrasound, and how everything is healthy and that's all there is to it, when there could be so much more. And like you said, it's beyond prevention, it's amplification, it's optimization, it's like it's more, it's huge. And so
or beyond vitamins, right? Or even a prenatal yoga class or something, which is not that it's not important, but there's so much depth and long term, right? Like that we're stretching out like not being just short-term benefit focused around pain and suffering, right? Because naturally that's what we feel and we want to not feel it. And that's a total human need. And so that's really important. But now are we thinking like super long term for our life paths and for our soul journeys? Yeah. So
Totally,
that's the
totally.
name of the game a bit more here. So kind of
Yeah.
stretching the and that's why I say like a lot of this work becomes just a lot about sharing knowledge and education for something for food for thought for them, and that and we hope that that will kind of make people pause a little bit and reconsider maybe some their habits. But the important part is sharing and then letting it awaken naturally within themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Shweta, you mentioned that you have the 45-day program, and I'm sure you have lots of other ways that you work with people on all of these various things. Could you share a little bit about that with our audience?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of my work is focused on, because it's so customized, on one-on-one consultations. And that's one-on-one, because it's Ayurveda requires a lot of patience and just being in the moment and just implementing the habits. It's better to have 21-day programs and a 45-day program, so that there's so much changing. Once you start changing one habit, it reverberates. And so there's check-ins throughout those programs, and more guidance that goes deeper into one's individualized, customized journey. And then with birth work too, again, that's subconscious repatterning work. There's the Ayurvedic piece, of course, what for infertility, or if you're pregnant, doing consultations around that. Postpartum, as in many traditions, we have the 45-day window, sacred window of deep healing that many traditions carry. And so I work within that 45-day window, although in our modern times, I say 3 months versus 6 weeks. Of customized meals, body work, and clinical consultations and things. And again, there's no hard and fast rules. Depending on what the client's needs are, we create packages that way. And of course, upcoming for 2023 will be a lot more webinars on the Ayurvedic piece, but also the subtler subconscious repatterning piece as well. So.
Love that. I can't wait to get more information on that. So how do people contact you if they want to reach you and learn more
So
about the
my
practice?
website is GutsierLiving.com, and the birth work was going to be rebranded to Mamaing the Baby. So that's still being built out. So the main hub right now is GutsierLiving.com, and folks can email me at Shweta@GutsierLiving.com, or reach me out on any of the social media platforms at shweta.parmar.ayurveda. So folks can do that. There's ongoing Ayurveda for Women sessions that I facilitate with one of my mentors and colleagues twice bi-weekly, every first and third Sundays, which are free. It's, again, the main point is to start sharing concepts and ways of thinking to start to unlearn and decondition ourselves as well. So that information could be found at the Ayurveda for Women handles on social media as well. So
great. And I'll make sure to drop all of that information in our show notes. Listeners, go ahead and check it out. Shweta comes with so much knowledge. She has so many resources as well. Even if it's for a question or if it's more of a long-term commitment, I think that knowledge is really important. And so just educating yourself on some of these topics, familiarizing yourself with maybe some aspects of, just different kinds of practices and different kinds of ways of looking at health in your body. And whether this is in your perinatal, prenatal, postpartum space, or you're totally outside of that space, this work kind of relates and can be important for really anyone at any point in their life. So I encourage everyone to check that out. And I'm so happy and lucky to have a fellow Desi and also someone in the similar kind of space as me, who has, like you said, like-hearted, like-minded, working with similar clients in the same space. So thank you so much, Shweta, for your time and for your wisdom.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me in your sacred space, in your sacred womb here as a podcast. It's another container, right? So, and always, happy to share this knowledge, which was so blessed. I feel so blessed to have it in my life for my own
Yeah.
personal journey. And all I can do is keep sharing it in different ways. So thank you so much.